You remind me, talking about this bondslave, this servant's attitude, of the first two Moravian missionaries.
Exactly.
Zinzendorf has this desire. There's a call now from the West Indies. People are saying, we've never heard of this message in this purest form. Please send more people. And they're warned. Now, if you go as the Moravians, as you Germans and other Scandinavians to this place, they will never have the time. They are working in the fields. They cannot listen to the message of the only way for them to hear the gospel is if you sell yourself into slavery. Suddenly, David, I can't recall his last name off the top of my head, right, and Doberman was the last one. The first two missionaries of the Moravian movement were willing to sell themselves into slavery so that the West Indies might be saved. And this is an example we must emulate.
The most dramatic example.
And then I recall reading their story as the boat set sail from Copenhagen toward the West Indies, and people are crying, weeping on the shore as the boat sets sail, and the distance between them grows larger, and suddenly they break, I get emotional just thinking about this, they break into song and shouting back from the boat. They say, may the lamb that was slain receive the glory for which he suffered. And wow, powerful imagery of a servant, of a slave going for the sake of salvation.
And talking about effectivity, they truly shook the Caribbean.
That's right. And I think within, is it 2 or 4 years, I believe there were marked 7,000 people who had been baptized through their witness. That servant-heartedness truly transforms. That is messianic. That is the Jesus kind of missionary we need today.
Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join his mission. This podcast is powered by Within Reach Global.
2 young Moravians heard of an island in the West Indies where an atheist British owner had 2,000 to 3,000 slaves. And the owner had said, no preacher, no clergyman will ever stay on this island. If he's shipwrecked, we'll keep him in a separate house until he has to leave, but he's never going to talk to any of us about God. 3,000 slaves from the jungles of Africa brought to an island in the Atlantic, and there to live and die without hearing of Christ. 2 young Moravians heard about it. They sold themselves to the British planter and used the money they received from the sale, for he paid no more than he would for any slave, to pay their passage out to his island, for he wouldn't even transport them. And as the ship left the river at Hamburg, left its pier in the river at Hamburg, and was going out into the North Sea, carried with the tide, the Moravians had come from Herrnhut to see these 2 lads off in the early 20s, never to return again, for this wasn't a 4-year term. They'd sold themselves into lifetime slavery, simply that as slaves they could be as Christians, where these others were. The families were there weeping, for they knew they'd never see them again. And they wondered why they were going and questioned the wisdom of it. And as the gap widened and the houses had been cast off and were being curled up there on the pier, and the young boys saw the widening gap, one lad with his arm linked through the arm of his fellow raised his hand and shouted across the gap the last words that were heard from them. There were these: may the Lamb that was slain receive the reward of his suffering. The gap, the last words that were heard from them. May the Lamb that was slain receive the reward of his suffering. And this became the core of Moravian missions. And this is the only reason for being, that the Lamb that was slain may receive the reward of his suffering.
This is also a great source of introspection for me, where often a person thinks about immigrating to other countries where so-called Christians think they'll have more opulence, better business opportunities, and a more luxurious life, where the old Christians looked for the worst places on the face of the earth to go to spread the gospel.